Relinquishing the How, The Paradox of Supreme Mental Power by Joseph Murphy, ASA, Resection 1. The Prison of How. There is a question that has destroyed more dreams than failure ever could. It is not the question of whether you are worthy. It is not the question of whether you deserve the thing you long for. It is a question far more insidious, far more quietly devastating, because it disguises itself as intelligence. It wears the mask of responsibility, and you have been asking it your entire life without realizing it is the very chain that keeps you bound. The question is how? How will this happen? How will the money come? How will the healing occur? How will the right person find me? How will the opportunity arrive when every door appears shut and every road seems impassable? You ask it, and you believe you are being practical. You ask it, and you believe you are being wise. But let me tell you something that took me decades of study, decades of prayer, decades of working with thousands of men and women in every conceivable circumstance of life to understand. The question of how is not wisdom. It is fear dressed in a suit and tie. It is doubt wearing the spectacles of logic. And every single time you ask it, you send a telegram to your own subconscious mind that reads, I do not believe this is possible. Now, you may resist that. You may say, but Joseph, surely we must plan, surely we must think things through, surely the rational mind has its place. And you would be partially correct. The rational mind is a magnificent servant, but it is a catastrophic master. And most of the people sitting in this room, and most of the people who will ever hear these words, have made the rational mind your God. You worship at the altar of logic. You genuflect before the throne of analysis. And then you wonder why your prayers go unanswered, why your deepest desires remain perpetually out of reach, why you feel this gnawing sense that life is happening to you rather than through you. Here is what I want you to understand, and understand it not with your intellect but with every fiber of your being. The subconscious mind, that infinite reservoir of creative power that dwells within you, does not operate on logic. It does not require a business plan. It does not need a 5-step strategy. It does not care whether you can see the path from where you are to where you want to be. It cares about one thing and one thing only, what you believe to be true. Let me say that again, because if you hear nothing else from me, hear this. Your subconscious mind will move heaven and earth to bring into your life whatever you genuinely, deeply, unshakably believe to be true about yourself and your world. Not what you hope, not what you wish, not what you think would be nice, what you believe, what you accept, what you feel in the marrow of your bones to be real. And here is the paradox that gives this teaching its power. The moment you demand to know how it will happen, you reveal that you do not yet believe it will happen. The demand for a mechanism is itself the evidence of doubt. A person who truly believes they will be healed does not interrogate the method. A person who truly believes abundance is their birthright does not lie awake at night constructing elaborate financial scenarios. They rest in the knowing. And the knowing does the work. This is not magical thinking. This is not some fantasy I am spinning to make you feel comfortable. This is the most practical, the most demonstrable, the most scientifically supported truth about the human mind that exists. Every great psychologist, from William James to Carl Jung, has pointed toward this same reality, that the conscious mind proposes, but the subconscious mind disposes. The conscious mind is the captain who gives the order. The subconscious mind is the crew of 10,000 that carries it out. But the captain must give a clear order, and an order that comes wrapped in doubt, hedged with qualifications, burdened with the demand for a detailed operational plan. That is not an order. That is a negotiation, and the subconscious does not negotiate. So here is my invitation to you, not a command, not a demand, an invitation offered with all the tenderness and all the urgency I can muster. Stop asking how. Just stop. Let the question die. Let it fall away from you like dead leaves from a tree in autumn. You do not need it. It has never served you. And everything you have ever truly desired is waiting on the other side of that surrender. Conceptual 2. The subconscious does not negotiate. Most people treat the subconscious mind the way they treat a stubborn employee. They try to convince it, argue with it, present evidence, build a case. They stand before the mirror in the morning and recite affirmations through clenched teeth, all while a voice in the back of their mind whispers, "This is ridiculous. Nothing is changing. You are just talking to yourself." And they wonder why the affirmations do not work. Let me tell you why they do not work. They do not work because the subconscious mind does not listen to words. It listens to conviction. It listens to feeling. It listens to the deep, unspoken assumptions you carry about who you are and what is possible for you. You can say, "I am wealthy" 10,000 times a day, but if the feeling behind those words is desperation, if the emotional texture of that statement is need rather than fulfillment, your subconscious will faithfully reproduce the desperation. It will give you more circumstances to feel desperate about, because that is what it heard, not the words, the feeling beneath the words. Think of it this way. Your subconscious mind is like the most sophisticated recording studio ever built. It captures everything, every nuance, every undertone, every unspoken frequency, and it plays back exactly what was recorded. If you record fear, it plays back fear. If you record lack, it plays back lack. If you record the quiet, settled feeling of already having what you desire, not the frantic wanting of it, but the peaceful having of it, then it plays back circumstances, events, meetings, coincidences, and opportunities that match that frequency. When I was a young man studying in India, long before I ever stood before a congregation, I met a teacher who changed the entire trajectory of my understanding. He was not famous. He had no books, no following, no public presence. He lived simply in a small room near the banks of a river, and people came to him not because he advertised, but because results followed him the way a shadow follows a body in sunlight. One afternoon, I asked him the question I had been asking everyone. How does mental healing work? How does the mind affect the body? How does thought become thing? And he looked at me with a patience that bordered on amusement, and he said something I have never forgotten. He said, "You are asking the river to explain itself to you. The river does not explain. The river flows. Your only task is to stop building dams." At the time, I thought this was evasive. I thought he was avoiding my question because he did not have a satisfactory answer. It took me years of study, years of practice, years of working with people whose lives were transformed in ways that defied every rational explanation, to understand that he had given me the most precise, the most complete, the most devastatingly accurate answer possible. The subconscious mind does not explain its methods to the conscious mind. It does not submit a proposal for your review. It does not present options A, B, and C and ask you to select your preferred route. It simply does the work. Your only task is to stop interfering. And how do you interfere? You interfere by asking how. You interfere by worrying. You interfere by constructing mental scenarios in which things go wrong. You interfere by checking, by monitoring, by standing over the process like an anxious parent hovering over a child trying to tie their shoes for the first time. Every time you check, you communicate distrust. Every time you worry, you plant the seed of the very outcome you fear. Every time you demand to see the mechanism, you jam a stick into the gears of the most powerful creative machinery in the known universe. There was a woman who came to see me many years ago in Los Angeles. She had been diagnosed with a condition that her doctors told her was incurable. They had given her a timeline. They had spoken to her in that careful, measured tone that physicians use when they are preparing you for the work. And she sat in my office, not crying, not hysterical, but with a kind of fierce stillness in her eyes that I have learned to recognize. It is the look of someone who has been pushed to the edge of what the rational mind can handle, and who is ready, truly ready, to try something beyond reason. I did not give her a complicated program. I did not give her 17 steps and a workbook. I told her one thing. I said, every night before you fall asleep, feel yourself healthy. Do not visualize medical procedures. Do not imagine doctors telling you good news. Simply feel the freedom, the ease, the vitality of a completely healthy body. Feel it as if it is already so. And do not ask how. She looked at me and said, that is it. And I said, that is everything. She did this faithfully for weeks, then months. And the healing came not through the channels she expected, not through the methods she would have designed if she had been in charge of the process, but through a sequence of events so perfectly orchestrated that no human planner could have arranged them. A new doctor, a new treatment that had not existed 6 months earlier, a friend who mentioned a name at a dinner party. Link after link in a chain that her conscious mind could never have forged, but that her subconscious mind assembled with the precision of a master jeweler setting stone. This is what happens when you stop building dams. The river flows. Section 3, the farmer and the seed. Every great truth can be understood through nature, because nature does not lie and nature does not hurry. Consider the farmer. The farmer goes out in the spring, prepares the soil, and places the seed into the earth. And then, and this is the part that most people cannot tolerate, the farmer walks away. The farmer does not stand over the ground with a flashlight at midnight, digging up the seed to check whether it has sprouted. The farmer does not call other farmers in a panic and say, it has been 3 days and nothing has happened. Should I try a different seed? The farmer does not write an angry letter to the earth demanding a progress report. The farmer knows something that you have forgotten. The farmer knows that the intelligence within the seed already contains the blueprint for the oak, the wheat, the rose. The farmer knows that the soil has been doing this work for millions of years and does not require supervision. The farmer knows that his job ended the moment the seed left his hand. Everything else belongs to a power greater than his conscious will. Now transpose this understanding onto your own life. When you hold a desire in your mind, when you feel it deeply and accept it as true, you have planted a seed. That seed contains within it every resource, every connection, every circumstance, every seemingly miraculous coincidence required for its fulfillment. The subconscious mind is the soil, and the soil knows what to do. But what do most people do? They plant the seed on Monday. By Wednesday, they are digging it up. Where is my manifestation? Where is my healing? Where is my prosperity? It has been 48 hours and nothing has changed. They examine their bank account. They check the mirror for signs of healing. They scan the horizon for the person they have been praying for. And every single act of checking is an act of digging up the seed. Every moment of surveillance is a moment of distrust. And distrust kills the seed as surely as frost kills a flower. I recall a gentleman who came to me years ago. He was a businessman, sharp, successful in many ways, but there was one area of his life that tormented him. He wanted to expand his enterprise into a new territory, but every avenue he pursued seemed to close. He had hired consultants. He had studied the market. He had created projections and timelines and contingency plans, and still the door would not open. When he described his situation to me, I noticed something interesting. He used the word how more times in 10 minutes than most people use it in a week. How will I break into this market? How will I find the right partners? How will I finance the expansion? How will I compete with established firms? His mind was a factory of how, running 3 shifts a day, producing nothing but anxiety. I told him the story of the farmer, and then I said something that offended him deeply. I could see it in the tightening of his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. I said, you do not have a business problem. You have a faith problem. You have planted the seed of your desire, and you will not stop digging it up. He left my office that day unconvinced. But something I said must have lodged in him the way a splinter lodges under the skin, invisibly, persistently, impossible to ignore. Because he came back 3 weeks later and told me that he had tried something radical. He had stopped planning. Not forever, not irresponsibly, but he had taken 1 week in which he refused to think about the how. Every time the question arose, he let it pass like a cloud moving across the sky. He did not chase it. He did not engage it. He simply returned to the feeling of what it would be like to already have the expansion accomplished, the new office open, the partnerships in place. And in that single week, without any effort on his part, a contact he had not spoken to in 4 years called him out of nowhere with exactly the introduction he needed. Not approximately. Exactly. The door he had been beating on for 18 months swung open from the other side. Now, you can call this coincidence if you like. You can call it luck. You can call it timing. But when you see this pattern repeat itself hundreds of times in hundreds of lives across every conceivable circumstance, when the evidence accumulates until it becomes a mountain, at some point, intellectual honesty demands that you consider the possibility that something real is happening here. Something that operates beneath the level of conscious strategy. Something that responds not to your plans but to your beliefs. The seed does not need your help to grow. It needs your trust. And trust, real trust, means walking away from the freshly planted ground and going about your life as though the harvest is already guaranteed. Because it is, it always has been. The only thing that ever prevented it was your refusal to leave it alone. There is a verse in the book of Mark that has always struck me with its simplicity and its depth. It says that a man scatters seed on the ground, and night and day, whether he sleeps or rises, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. He does not know how. Those 5 words contain the entire teaching. The farmer does not know the biochemistry of germination. He does not understand the molecular processes by which water and minerals and sunlight conspire to turn a dry husk into a living shoot. And his ignorance does not impede the process 1 fraction of a degree. The seed grows anyway. The seed has always grown, and it will grow for you. What separates those who demonstrate the power of mind from those who merely admire it from a distance is this single quality: the willingness to plant and walk away. The willingness to hold the desire in consciousness, to feel its reality, to accept it as done, and then to release it completely, utterly, without reservation into the care of the subconscious mind. Most of you are standing in the garden with a shovel, exhausted, dirt under your fingernails, wondering why nothing is blooming. Put down the shovel. The earth does not need your excavation. It needs your absence. Walk away. Go live your life. Let the invisible do what the invisible has been doing since the first dawn broke over the first horizon. You cannot improve upon a process that predates your existence by billions of years. You can only interfere with it. So stop interfering. Conceptual 4. When I learned to stop asking why, let me share with you a chapter from my own life that I do not speak of often, because it required me to be wrong about something I was very certain I was right about. And if there is anything more difficult than failure, it is discovering that your certainty was the cause of your failure all along. There was a period early in my ministry when I was deeply committed to understanding the mechanism of prayer. Not just that prayer worked, I had seen too much evidence to doubt that, but precisely how it worked. What was the chain of causation? What were the intermediate steps? If a person prayed for healing and healing came, what happened between the prayer and the result? What were the invisible gears that turned? I wanted to map it the way a physicist maps the trajectory of a particle. I wanted the equation, and so I studied. Good Lord, did I study. Every text I could find, the ancient scriptures, the writings of Troward, the lectures of Emmet Fox, the psychological research coming out of the universities. I filled notebooks. I constructed theories. I debated with colleagues. I was building, brick by intellectual brick, a grand edifice of understanding that would explain everything. And during this entire period, something strange was happening. My own demonstrations, the answered prayers in my own life, the healings, the resolutions of seemingly impossible problems, slowed to a trickle. It was as if a faucet had been gradually closed. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, steadily, the flow diminished until I was standing in a dry riverbed, holding my notebooks and my theories, wondering what had gone wrong. I remember the morning it broke open for me. I was sitting in my study, surrounded by books, and I was tired. Not physically tired, soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to force something that cannot be forced. And in that tiredness, in that moment of complete surrender that was not philosophical, but simply the collapse of a man who had run out of intellectual fuel, a thought dropped into my mind with a clarity that was almost audible. The thought was this: you have been trying to understand the engine instead of driving the car. That single realization restructured everything. All my study, all my analysis, all my desperate need to understand the how, it had not been advancing my practice. It had been replacing my practice. I had substituted intellectual comprehension for experiential faith. I had traded the living reality of answered prayer for a dead theory about answered prayer. And the subconscious mind, which responds only to lived conviction, had nothing to work with. My faith had become academic. And academic faith moves nothing. From that morning forward, I changed my approach completely. When I prayed, I stopped analyzing the prayer. When I held a mental image, I stopped trying to trace the pathway between the image and its manifestation. When I felt the reality of the answered prayer, I stopped demanding to know which neural circuits were firing. I simply did the work, trusted the process, and let go. And the demonstrations returned, not gradually, abruptly, as if a dam had broken. Within a single month, 3 situations that had been frozen for over a year resolved themselves. A legal matter that had been tangled beyond all human remedy simply dissolved. A relationship that had been strained to the point of severance healed overnight. A financial need that I had worried over endlessly was met from a source so unexpected that I laughed out loud when it arrived. What changed? Nothing external. Nothing in my technique, nothing in my words. What changed was that I stopped asking how. I stopped positioning my conscious mind as the inspector general of the subconscious mind's operation. I stopped demanding that the infinite explain itself to the finite. And in that release, in that beautiful, terrifying, liberating release, the power that had always been there rushed back into my life like water into a channel that has been unblocked. This is what I want you to understand about your own situation, whatever it may be. You are not lacking power. You are not lacking faith. You are not lacking worthiness. You are lacking surrender. You have your hands so tightly wrapped around the steering wheel of your life that the very force that could carry you to everything you desire cannot get through your grip. Your control is your cage. Your planning is your prison. And the key, the only key, is to open your hands. Conceptual 5, the tyranny of logic. There is a kind of intelligence that the modern world worships above all others. It is the intelligence of analysis, of reduction, of breaking complex things into component parts and examining each piece under a microscope. It is the intelligence that builds bridges and calculates orbits and sequences genomes. And it is magnificent. Let no one say I do not honor the rational mind. It has given humanity wonders beyond counting. But here is what the rational mind cannot do. It cannot create. It can only rearrange. It can take what already exists and recombine it, optimize it, improve it. but it cannot reach into the void and bring forth something that has never existed before. That is the province of another faculty entirely, the faculty of imagination, of intuition, of the subconscious creative power that operates beneath the threshold of logical awareness. And yet, when you sit down with your deepest desire, what do? You subject it to the tribunal of logic. You haul it before the court of reason and demand that it justify itself. Is this realistic? Is this achievable? Do the numbers work? What is the probability? What are the risks? And one by one, the judges of your rational mind hand down their verdict. Insufficient evidence. Case dismissed. Do you see what is happening? You are using a tool designed for analysis to evaluate something that exists in the realm of creation. You are using a thermometer to measure sound. You are using a ruler to weigh love. The instrument is not wrong. It is simply being applied to the wrong dimension of experience. Every breakthrough in human history, every one, without exception, came from someone who was willing to believe in something that logic said was impossible. The Wright brothers did not fly because the mathematics supported it. The mathematics of their day said sustained heavier than air flight was impractical. They flew because they believed they could fly, and that belief activated a creative power that found a way through the apparent impossibility. When Marconi told people he could send signals through the air without wires, his own friends tried to have him committed to a mental institution. His friends. The people who knew him best, who had seen his intelligence firsthand, who presumably cared about his well-being, they were so enslaved to what logic said was possible that they concluded he must be insane. Because that was the only logical explanation for a man who believed in the impossible. And yet the impossible happened. It always does when belief is total and the demand for how is relinquished. You are doing this to yourself every single day. You have a desire, a real desire, not a whim, not a fantasy, but something that burns in you with a quiet, persistent flame. And before you even give it a chance to breathe, you calculate the odds, you assess the obstacles, you inventory your current resources and conclude that they are insufficient. And then, having performed this thorough assassination of your own dream, you call it maturity, you call it being realistic. There is nothing mature about killing your own potential with a spreadsheet. There is nothing realistic about defining reality as only what has already happened. Reality is not a museum. It is a living, breathing, endlessly creative force, and it is shaped every moment of every day by the beliefs and assumptions of the minds that inhabit. I am not asking you to abandon reason. I am asking you to put reason in its proper place, which is second. Belief comes first. Vision comes first. The deep, unshakable conviction that what you desire is not only possible, but already exists in the invisible dimension of mind, that comes first. And then, once that conviction is established, once the subconscious mind has received its clear instruction, then the rational mind can do what it does brilliantly: organize, plan, execute, optimize. But it must never lead. When logic leads, you get competence. When belief leads, you get miracle. Ask yourself honestly right now, how many desires have you murdered at the altar of logic? How many visions have you strangled in the cradle because they could not survive the scrutiny of your analytical mind? How many prayers have you prayed with your lips while your intellect stood behind you whispering, "This is not going to work"? Every single one of those assassinated desires is still alive. They are alive in the infinite mind, waiting for the moment when you will stop negotiating with them and simply accept them. They do not need your logic. They need your faith. And faith, real faith, is not the absence of thought. It is the presence of a conviction so deep that no thought can dislodge it. Let me tell you what logic cannot account for. Logic cannot account for the woman who was told she would never walk again and who walked. Logic cannot account for the man who was bankrupt on Monday and received an inheritance from a distant relative he had never met on Thursday. Logic cannot account for the student who was rejected by every university, who held the image of herself in a cap and gown with such persistent conviction that a clerical error at one institution reversed her rejection and placed her in the incoming class. These are not fairy tales. These are events I have witnessed firsthand in my own congregation with my own eyes. Logic looks at these events and says, anomaly, exception, coincidence. But when exceptions begin to form a pattern, and when coincidences begin to cluster around people who share a single common practice, the practice of believing without demanding to know how, then perhaps it is logic itself that needs to expand its framework. Perhaps it is the definition of possible that needs revision. You have been told that the reasonable person adapts to the world, and the unreasonable person attempts to adapt the world to themselves, and therefore all progress depends upon the unreasonable person. This is not just a clever saying. It is a law of creative manifestation. Every advance, every breakthrough, every quantum leap in human experience came from someone who was willing to be unreasonable, to hold a conviction that contradicted the visible evidence, and to maintain that conviction until the evidence changed. Be unreasonable. Hold your desire in the face of every logical objection. Feel its reality when every fact on the ground contradicts it. And watch what logic could never have predicted unfold before you with a precision and a beauty that will take your breath away. 6. Feeling is the secret language. Now we arrive at the heart of the matter, the mechanism, if we must use that word, that makes all of this work. And it is simpler than you expect. So simple that many people hear it and dismiss it because they believe something so powerful must be complicated. It is not complicated. It is the simplest truth in the universe, and it is this. Feeling is the language of the subconscious mind, not thought, not words, not visualization, though visualization can be useful. Feeling, the felt sense of the reality you wish to inhabit, the emotional tone of the life you desire. When you can feel in your body and in your being the reality of your wish fulfilled, when you can sit quietly and genuinely experience the relief of being healed, the joy of being loved, the security of being prosperous, the peace of being free, in that moment, you have spoken directly to the creative power within you in the only language it fully understands. Think about this carefully. When have you felt the most powerful surges of creative energy in your life? Was it when you were planning? Was it when you were analyzing? Or was it when you were feeling, when you were in love, when you were inspired, when you were moved by music or beauty or the sight of your child's face? In those moments, something opened inside you. Something beyond the rational mind came alive. That something is the subconscious creative faculty, and it was awakened not by your thoughts, but by your feelings. This is why affirmations so often fail. A person stands before the mirror and says, I am wealthy, I am healthy, I am successful. But the feeling behind those words is anxiety, desperation, longing. The words say one thing, the feeling says another. And the subconscious mind, which is infinitely more sensitive to feeling than to language, responds to the feeling every time. It is as if you are sending two messages simultaneously, a telegram that reads, all is well, and a radio broadcast that screams, everything is falling apart. The subconscious hears the broadcast. It always hears the broadcast. So how do you change the broadcast? Not by force, not by willpower, not by gritting your teeth and trying harder. You change it by finding within yourself the genuine feeling of what you desire as already accomplished. This is the art. This is the practice. This is what distinguishes those who demonstrate the power of mind from those who merely theorize about it. Let me give you a practical example. Suppose you desire financial freedom. The typical approach is to affirm wealth while feeling poor. The effective approach is entirely different. You sit quietly, you close your eyes, and you ask yourself, what would it actually feel like to be financially free? Not what would it look like? What would it feel like? What would the texture of your daily experience be? Would your shoulders drop? Would your breathing slow? Would there be a warm sense of ease in your chest? Would you feel generous, expansive, unhurried? Find that feeling. It is already within you because you have experienced moments of ease and expansion before, even if they were brief. Locate that feeling and then gently, without strain, let it fill you, inhabit it, rest in it. Do not try to sustain it by force. That would be like trying to hold water by squeezing your fist. Simply rest in it the way you rest in a warm bath. Let it surround you. Let it become, for those few minutes, more real than the circumstances outside your window. When you do this, when you genuinely feel the reality of your fulfilled desire, you have given the subconscious mind a perfect, unambiguous instruction. There is no static on the line. There is no contradiction between your words and your emotional state. The message is clean, clear, and complete. And the subconscious responds to a clean message the way fertile soil responds to a healthy seed, with absolute fidelity. I have watched this principle transform lives that seemed beyond all hope of transformation. I have seen men and women who were imprisoned by circumstances so severe that any rational observer would have called their situation permanent. Financial ruin, chronic illness, broken relationships, addictions that had resisted every treatment, break free not by fighting harder, but by feeling differently, by learning to generate within themselves the emotional reality of freedom before the external circumstances change, and then watching, often in astonishment, as the external circumstances rearrange themselves to match the internal reality. This is not wishful thinking. This is the most rigorous, the most demanding, the most honest practice you will ever undertake, because it requires you to be truthful about what you are actually feeling, not what you are telling yourself you are feeling. It requires you to confront the gap between your words and your emotional reality and to close that gap, not by changing your words, but by changing your feeling. And that is hard. That is perhaps the hardest thing a human being can do. But it is also the most powerful. Your feelings are not decorations on the surface of your life. They are the foundation. They are the blueprint from which your subconscious mind constructs every circumstance, every relationship, every condition of your existence. Change the feeling, and you change the blueprint. Change the blueprint, and the entire building transforms. Not in theory, in fact. Section 7. The man who healed without medicine. Let me tell you about a man named Thomas. That is not his real name. I have changed it to protect his privacy. But the story is true in every detail, and I tell it because there are some truths that can only be transmitted through story, not through argument. Thomas was a dock worker in San Francisco. He was 53 years old, built like a man who had spent his life lifting heavy things, with hands the size of dinner plates and a voice that sounded like gravel being poured into a bucket. He was not a religious man. He was not a spiritual seeker. He had never meditated, never prayed outside of childhood, never read a book about the power of the mind. He came to me because his wife dragged him there, and he sat in my office looking like a man who would rather be anywhere else on earth. His doctors had found a growth. It was in a location that made surgery dangerous, and the alternatives they offered were grim. His wife had heard me speak at a church function and had become convinced that mental healing was worth trying. Thomas was convinced of nothing except that his wife would not stop talking about it until he came. I liked him immediately. There was no pretension in him, no performance, no eagerness to impress. He looked at me and said, "My wife thinks you can help me." I think this is a waste of time, but I love her, so here I am. I told him the truth. I cannot heal anyone. No person heals another person. What I could do was teach him to use a faculty that already existed within him, a faculty that his doctors, with all their training and all their technology, had no access to. I told him about the subconscious mind. I told him about the relationship between belief and physical conditions. I told him about feeling as the language of creation. He listened the way a mechanic listens to someone describing a car problem. Attentively, practically, without any emotional investment in the theory, only in whether it would produce a result. And then he asked me a question that I will remember for the rest of my life. He said, "Do I have to believe it will work?" I said, "No. You have to feel as though it has already worked." He stared at me for a long time. And then he said, "All right. Tell me what to do." What I told him was this: every night, as you are falling asleep, imagine yourself at the doctor's office. But do not imagine the doctor giving you bad news. Imagine the doctor looking at your results with confusion and delight. Imagine him saying, "I cannot explain this, but it is gone." Feel the relief of those words. Feel the weight lift. Feel the celebration. Feel your wife's arms around you. Feel the walk back to the car, knowing that you are well. Do not worry about making it vivid or perfect. Just find the feeling and let it carry you into sleep. Thomas did this every night for 11 weeks. He told me later that the first few weeks felt ridiculous. He was a practical man, and lying in bed imagining a doctor's visit felt like playing pretend. But he kept doing it because he had promised his wife, and because, and this is the part he admitted with some embarrassment, the feeling of relief that he generated each night was becoming real to him. Not intellectually real, emotionally real. It felt in his body as though the healing had already occurred. At his next medical appointment, the scans showed that the growth had reduced by more than half. His doctors were baffled. They ran the tests again. Same result. They consulted with specialists. No one could explain it. There had been no medical intervention of any kind. Thomas continued his nightly practice. 3 months later, the growth was undetectable. Now I can already hear the objections forming in some of your minds. Spontaneous remission, statistical anomaly, misdiagnosis. And I understand those objections because they come from the rational mind, which must explain everything within its own framework or reject it. But I ask you to consider this. Thomas did not care about the explanation. Thomas cared about the result. And the result was that a man who had been told to prepare for the worst walked out of a hospital completely well, carrying nothing but a feeling of gratitude and a profound confusion about what exactly had happened. What happened was this. Thomas gave his subconscious mind a clear, emotionally charged instruction, free from doubt and free from the demand to know how. He did not research healing modalities. He did not study anatomy. He did not try to direct the process. He simply felt well and let the power within him do the rest. And the power did the rest. As it always does, as it always has, as it will for you, if you can bring yourself to trust it. Conceptual 8. Surrender is not weakness. There is a word that the modern world has thoroughly misunderstood. And that word is surrender. Say it out loud and watch what happens in your mind. For most people, surrender conjures images of defeat. White flags, dropped weapons, bowed heads, and broken spirit. It is the word we use for the moment when fighting becomes pointless, when the enemy has won, when hope has been exhausted. But that is not the surrender I am speaking of. The surrender I am speaking of is the opposite of defeat. It is the ultimate act of power. It is the moment when you stop fighting against the current of life and allow yourself to be carried by a force that is infinitely wiser, infinitely more creative, and infinitely more powerful than your conscious mind could ever be. Think about what happens when you fight a river. You exhaust yourself. You swallow water. You thrash and strain and burn through every ounce of energy you have. And at the end of it, the river has not moved 1 inch. It goes exactly where it was always going. The only thing your fighting accomplished was your own suffering. Now think about what happens when you surrender to the river. Not when you give up, when you surrender. There is a profound difference. Giving up means you stop caring. Surrender means you stop controlling. When you surrender to the river, you lie back, you let the water support your weight, and you allow the current to carry you. And here is the miracle. The river almost always carries you somewhere better than where you were trying to swim. Your subconscious mind is that river. It is an infinite current of intelligence and creative power that knows exactly where to take you. It has been flowing since before you were born, and it will continue flowing long after your conscious mind has had its final thought. When you surrender to it, when you truly let go of the need to direct, control, manage, and micromanage every aspect of your life, you are not weakening yourself. You are aligning yourself with a power so vast that your conscious mind cannot even comprehend its scope. I know this is frightening. I know it feels like stepping off a cliff into darkness. Every instinct of the ego screams against it. The ego wants control. The ego needs control. Control is how the ego maintains the illusion that it is in charge, that it is the center of the universe, that it is the final authority on what is real and what is possible. Surrendering control feels, to the ego, like death. And in a sense, it is the death of a false self, a limited self, a self that was never real to begin with. The person you think you are, the planner, the strategist, the worrier, the controller, that person is a construct. A useful construct, perhaps, but a construct nonetheless. Beneath it, beneath all the planning and strategizing and worrying, there is something deeper. Something that does not need to control because it already is everything. Something that does not need to plan because it already knows everything. Something that does not need to worry because it has already provided everything. When I speak of surrender, I am not asking you to become passive. Passivity is the shadow of surrender, not its substance. True surrender is intensely active. It is the active release of resistance. It is the active choice to trust. It is the active decision to stop poisoning your own well with doubt and anxiety and the relentless demand for certainty in a universe that offers none. You want certainty. Here is the only certainty available to any human being. The subconscious mind responds faithfully to whatever is impressed upon it. That is a law, not a theory, not a hypothesis, not a suggestion. A law as reliable as gravity, as predictable as sunrise. If you impress upon your subconscious the feeling of health, it will produce health. If you impress upon it the feeling of abundance, it will produce abundance. If you impress upon it the feeling of love, it will produce love. This is certain. Everything else is variable. So surrender is not a leap into uncertainty. It is a leap into the only certainty there is, the certainty that the creative law of mind operates without fail, without exception, without prejudice for anyone who will trust it completely. Let go. Open your hands. Stop gripping the wheel so tightly that your knuckles turn white and your arms ache and your vision narrows to the 6 feet of road directly in front of you. There is a larger intelligence at work. There is a wider road than the one you can see. And the moment you release your death grip on the details, you will begin to see it. Not all at once, not with blinding clarity, but gradually, steadily, unmistakably, the way dawn reveals a landscape that was there all along, hidden only by darkness. I want to share something with you that happened to me not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in the quiet, ordinary way that most miracles actually occur. There was a year in my life when every financial calculation I made suggested that my work could not continue. The numbers did not add up. The expenses exceeded the income, and every rational analysis I performed confirmed that the situation was unsustainable. My analytical mind was in full command, and its verdict was clear: this cannot work. And for months, I listened to that verdict. I cut expenses. I restructured programs. I planned and replanned and revised and optimized. And the situation did not improve. It worsened because my attention was entirely fixed on the problem rather than the solution. I was so busy managing the crisis that I had no energy left to believe in the resolution. One evening, sitting alone in my study, I did something I had been teaching others to do for years but had forgotten to do myself. I surrendered, not to the problem, to the solution I could not yet see. I sat quietly and I said, inwardly, with more honesty than I had mustered in months, I do not know how this will resolve, and I do not need to know. I trust the power within me to provide. And then I really felt, the relief of that trust. The shoulders dropped, the jaw unclenched. The knot in my stomach loosened for the first time in weeks. Within 10 days, 3 things happened that no amount of planning could have produced. A speaking invitation arrived from an organization I had never contacted. A long overdue payment was released without my pursuing it. And a donor I had never met sent a contribution with a note that said simply, I felt moved to do this. 3 events, completely unrelated to each other, converging at exactly the right moment to resolve a situation that my conscious mind had declared impossible. That is what surrender looks like in practice. Not dramatic, not theatrical. Just a quiet inner release, followed by an outer rearrangement that the conscious mind could never have orchestrated. Conceptual 9, the architecture of assumption. Now let me give you something practical, because I have never believed that truth should remain in the abstract. If it cannot be practiced, it cannot be real. So here is the practice, stripped of all mysticism, all complexity, all unnecessary elaboration. Here is what you do. You begin by identifying what you truly desire, not what you think you should desire, not what society tells you is appropriate, not the watered-down, compromised version of your dream that you settled for because the full version seemed too audacious. The real thing. The desire that lives in the deepest chamber of your heart. The one you are almost afraid to admit to yourself because wanting it so badly makes you vulnerable. Name it. Not out loud if that feels too exposed. Name it silently in the sanctuary of your own mind. Say it clearly, without qualification, without hedging. Do not say, I would like to be healthy if it is possible. Say, I am healthy. Do not say, I hope to find a loving partner someday. Say, I am deeply and completely loved. Do not say, I want financial security. Say, I am abundantly provided for in every way. This is not delusion, this is assumption. And assumption, rightly understood, is the most creative act a human being can perform. When you assume a thing to be true, when you accept it in the feeling of your being, when you wear it the way you wear your own skin, naturally and without effort, you have set the creative law in motion. The subconscious mind receives the assumption as a command and begins immediately to reorganize your world to match it. But here is the discipline. You must live in the assumption, not visit it occasionally like a tourist. Live in it. When you wake in the morning, the first feeling you reach for should be the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not the problems of the day, not the worries of the week. The feeling. Let it color your first waking moments the way the first light of dawn colors the sky, gently, naturally, inevitably. Throughout the day, you will be tested. Circumstances will contradict your assumption. People will say things that challenge it. Your own thoughts will rebel against it. This is normal. This is expected. This is not evidence that the assumption is failing. It is evidence that the old patterns are dying, and like all dying things, they resist with everything they have. When the contradiction comes, and it will come, do not fight it. Do not argue with it. Do not try to convince yourself or anyone else that the assumption is true. Simply return to the feeling. Quietly, gently, without drama, return to the emotional tone of the fulfilled desire. The way a compass needle swings back to north after being disturbed, you are the compass. The feeling is your north. Keep returning. The nightly practice is essential. As you lie in bed in that drowsy state between waking and sleeping, what the psychologists call the hypnagogic state, your subconscious mind is most receptive. This is the golden hour. This is when the gates are open. In this state, bring to mind a single scene that implies your wish is fulfilled. Not a long movie, a single scene. The handshake after the deal is closed. The embrace of the person you love. The doctor's words confirming your health. The view from the window of the home you desire. Feel it, not as a future event, not as something that might happen. Feel it as something that has happened. Present tense, already accomplished, already real. Let the feeling of it saturate you as you drift into sleep. Do not strain. Do not effort. Simply marinate in the feeling the way a piece of wood absorbs the warmth of a fire. And then, and this is the part that requires everything I have been teaching you, let it go. Release it into sleep the way you release a letter into a mailbox. The delivery system is not your concern. The route the letter takes is not your business. You have done your part. The subconscious will do the rest. It always does. Do this every night. Not when you feel like it. Not when the mood strikes you. Every night. Consistency is not optional. It is the architecture. One night of powerful feeling followed by 6 nights of doubt produces nothing. The assumption must become habitual. It must become the default setting of your emotional life. And it will, if you practice with the gentle persistence of water wearing away stone. You will know it is working not when external circumstances change, though they will, but when your internal state changes. When you notice that the anxiety has diminished. When you realize that you have gone an entire day without worrying about the how. When you catch yourself feeling, genuinely, spontaneously, without trying, the peace and satisfaction of a person who already has what they desire. That inner shift is the real manifestation. Everything external that follows is simply its reflection. Septual 10. WAK forward, without a map. We have come a long way together, you and I, through these words and through the silence between them. And now I want to leave you with something that is not a technique, not a method, not a formula, but something deeper, a way of being, a posture of the soul, a relationship with life itself that, once established, will carry you further than any strategy you have ever devised. Walk forward without a map. That is it. That is the culmination of everything I have shared with you. All the principles, all the stories, all the teachings, they converge on this single, beautiful, terrifying instruction. Walk forward without a map. You have spent your entire life trying to see the path before you take the step. You have spent decades demanding guarantees before you invest your heart. You have exhausted yourself trying to eliminate uncertainty from a universe that is made of uncertainty, that breathes uncertainty, that creates through uncertainty the way an artist creates through the unknown space between the brush and the canvas. The greatest moments of your life, think back to them now. Were they planned? Were they mapped? Were they the predictable result of a carefully constructed strategy? Or did they arrive unbidden, unexpected, from a direction you never would have thought to look? The love that found you when you had stopped searching. The opportunity that appeared when you had stopped striving. The healing that came when you had stopped fighting. the answer that arrived when you had stopped asking. This is not coincidence. This is the pattern. This is how the creative intelligence of the universe operates, not through the narrow channel of your conscious planning, but through the infinite field of possibility that opens when you relinquish control. Consider the bird. The bird does not sit in its nest drawing flight plans and calculating wind resistance. The bird leaps, and the air holds it. The air was always going to hold it. The air has been holding birds since the first creature spread its wings and trusted the invisible. But the bird had to leap first. It had to leave the safety of the branch. It had to act before the evidence was in. That is what I am asking of you, not blind recklessness. That is different. Recklessness is acting without caring about the outcome. What I am asking is acting while caring deeply about the outcome, but refusing to let the need for certainty prevent the action. Leap and know that you will be held. Not because you can see what will hold you, but because the power that made you is the power that sustains you, and it has never, not once in the entire history of creation, failed to complete what it started. Your desire is not a mistake. That longing in your heart for healing, for love, for freedom, for purpose, for abundance, it was placed there by the same intelligence that placed the acorn's destiny within its shell. It is not random. It is not arbitrary. It is a signal, a call, a blueprint from the infinite mind telling you exactly what you are meant to become. And the path to becoming it does not run through logic, through planning, through the desperate accumulation of how. The path runs through trust, through feeling, through the daily, moment-by-moment practice of assuming that what you desire is already yours and acting accordingly. Every morning when you open your eyes, you have a choice. You can reach for your worries, your plans, your mental spreadsheets of everything that could go wrong. Or you can reach for the feeling, the deep, quiet, unshakable feeling that you are held, that you are guided, that the creative power of the universe is working through you and for you in ways that you cannot see and do not need to see. Make the second choice. Make it tomorrow morning. Make it the morning after that. Make it until it becomes so natural that you cannot remember ever living any other way. And then watch. Watch what happens when a human being stops fighting the river and learns to flow. Watch what unfolds when control is released and trust takes its place. Watch the doors that open, the people who appear, the solutions that emerge from places you never thought to look, because you stopped looking and started believing. There is a life waiting for you that is so far beyond what your conscious mind can conceive that if I described it to you in detail, you would not believe me. You would say, "That sounds wonderful, but how would that happen?" And I would smile because you would have just demonstrated the very prison I have been asking you to escape. Do not ask how. Relinquish the how. Let it go with the gratitude of a prisoner releasing the chain they did not realize they were holding voluntarily all along. The how is not your department. The how belongs to the infinite intelligence that built your body out of a single cell, that keeps your heart beating without your permission, that digests your food without your supervision, that heals your wounds without your instruction. That intelligence does not need your help. It needs your trust. You have everything you need, everything. Not everything you need to figure it out, everything you need to let it happen. The power is within you. It has always been within you. It was within you before you knew its name, before you read a single book, before you heard a single lecture. It is operating right now in this very moment as faithfully and as tirelessly as it has operated every moment of your existence. All that remains is for you to use it, not by straining, not by struggling, not by white-knuckling your way through another exhausting attempt to control the uncontrollable, by surrendering, by feeling, by assuming. By walking forward into the beautiful unknown with your heart open and your hands unclenched and your mind quiet and your spirit aligned with the infinite creative power that is your birthright, your inheritance, and your true nature, relinquish the how and discover at last who you really are. Because who you really are is not the worried mind that lies awake at 3 in the morning cataloging problems. Who you really are is not the frightened planner who needs to see every step before taking the first one. Who you really are is not the exhausted strategist who has been running projections and contingency plans since the age of 18. Who you really are is the awareness behind all of that. Vast, luminous, creative beyond all measure, connected to every resource in the universe, capable of achievements that would stagger your current imagination. That self does not need a map. That self is the map maker. That self does not need a plan. That self is the plan. And it has been waiting with infinite patience for you to stop talking long enough to listen. So listen right now, in this moment. Feel the truth of what I have said, not with your intellect, but with the deepest part of you, and then go forward. Go forward without the how. Go forward with nothing but your desire and your trust and the unshakable conviction that the power within you has never failed and will never fail. It is already done. Believe it, feel it, and let it be so. End of script.